Australia is being transformed by the US military. In the country's remote north, new runways are being laid, vast fuel depots are rising from the red earth, and hangars large enough to house America's biggest bombers are taking shape on Australian air bases. It's part of a construction surge that now makes Australia the top overseas destination for US military infrastructure spending, more than anywhere in Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. Between 2024 and 2025 alone, Washington has allocated over $300 million for upgrades to key Australian air bases, while a recent US Navy tender, worth up to $15 billion, covers new infrastructure projects stretching from Western Australia to the Cocos Islands and nearby territories like Timor-Leste. So why is the US military investing so heavily in the land down under? As tensions rise with China, Australia's location has become its greatest strategic asset. It sits just south of the Indo-Pacific's flashpoints, the South China Sea, Taiwan, and vital global trade routes. Close enough for the US to project power, yet distant enough to offer strategic depth and relative safety. While China's longest-range missiles could reach northern Australia, the country's vast territory still provides the space and distance Washington needs to disperse and protect its forces. Combined with its political reliability, that makes Australia the ideal hub for America's deterrence network, a secure platform for bombers, submarines, and logistics across the Pacific. Of course, this isn't entirely new. Australia played a similar role during the Second World War when General Douglas MacArthur ran the Pacific Campaign from Brisbane. But the current scale of US investment and the growing footprint of American forces across Australia in peacetime is something entirely new. Over the next few years, US Marines, submarines, and stealth bombers will rotate through Australia in growing numbers, including plans for a regular bomber task force at RAAF base Tindal, with facilities for up to 6 B-52 Stratofortress aircraft. It's part of a sweeping expansion of American forces across Australia, on land, in the air, and at sea, blurring the line between ally and base. Every dry season, around 2,500 US Marines and sailors now deploy to Darwin for 6 months of joint training and regional operations. What began as a small experiment in 2012 has become a fixture of life in the Northern Territory, an annual cycle of troops, aircraft, and equipment moving in and out of Australia's top end. The 2025 rotation included large-scale amphibious and air exercises across the north, from Talisman Sabre to Super Garuda Shield, linking Australia directly with allies in Indonesia, Japan, and the Philippines, alongside US forces. These drills are designed to test new island-hopping tactics and expeditionary base operations, the same concepts that would underpin any conflict in the Indo-Pacific. More importantly, during Talisman Sabre 2025, the US Army deployed its long-range hypersonic weapon to Australia, marking its first deployment outside US territory. Capable of striking targets at hypersonic speeds thousands of kilometers away, the system's arrival in the Northern Territory was a clear signal. The US can now project some of its most advanced land-based weapons from Australian soil. Meanwhile, the US Air Force is deepening its own footprint. B-52 bombers, KC-135 refuelers, B-2 stealth aircraft, and F-22 Raptors have all operated from RAAF bases Darwin and Tindal, especially during exercises like Pitch Black, which in 2024 brought together air forces from 21 nations. Under new defense agreements signed in 2024, these rotations will grow longer and more complex, supported by the $300 million in US-funded upgrades to runways, hangars, and fuel storage across northern Australia that I mentioned earlier. And just a few weeks ago, a US Navy contract worth up to $15 billion was announced for new infrastructure, stretching from Western Australia to the Cocos Islands and Timor-Leste, turning northern Australia and its surrounds into a launch pad for American air and naval power across the Indo-Pacific. The same transformation is unfolding beneath the waves. Near Perth, construction is underway on facilities for a submarine rotational force west, part of the AUKUS pack that will see US and UK nuclear-powered submarines rotating through Australia from as early as 2027. Up to 4 US and 1 British vessel will be based at HMAS Stirling, following early visits, such as the USS Minnesota in 2025. And on the opposite coast, the US Navy made headlines in mid-2025 when 2 vessels, the submarine tender USS Frank Cable and the USS Ohio, a guided missile submarine, docked in Brisbane. It was the first time an Ohio-class submarine had ever moored in the city, the same city that hosted America's submarine fleet during World War II. It comes as Australia is contributing nearly $8 billion to upgrade its naval infrastructure, a move officials say will strengthen deterrence in the Indian Ocean and create thousands of local jobs. Together, these rotations, land, air, and sea, are creating a continuous and growing American military presence in Australia, a presence supported by shared logistics, joint training, and billions in construction, quietly reshaping Australia's role and place in the region. But as the US expands its military footprint across the country, Canberra faces a defining question. Can it balance the ambitions of a disruptive superpower with the realities of living in a region shaped by China's rise? Critics of the American presence warn that this level of integration risks making Australia a target in any future US-China conflict, while eroding its freedom to act independently and turning its northern regions into extensions of America's forward bases. But other voices see the US military presence as necessary insurance, a way to deter coercion, attract investment in high-tech defense industries, and deepen ties with allies who share similar concerns about Beijing's growing influence. For now, Australia's relationships with its neighbours, from Indonesia to Japan, India, and the Pacific, are stronger and more stable than they've been in decades. Many of these countries quietly welcome a stronger Australian deterrent posture, even as they hedge against over-reliance on Washington. In that sense, Australia's future may not lie in choosing sides, but in managing a balance, maintaining US support while deepening regional partnerships that anchor it in a more multipolar Indo-Pacific. Yet the deeper America's presence becomes, the harder that balance will be to sustain. The quiet militarization of Australia has already begun. What remains to be seen is whether it strengthens the country's security or limits its freedom to chart its own course in an uncertain century.